Well, good morning. Thank you for coming out. Maybe for those that are online, it's good to see you. We are going to just get started with a couple of questions. So how many of you feel like you have a good understanding of the topic of human trafficking? So. Anybody online who feel like you have a good understanding of human trafficking? Well, that's why you're here, right? To learn more. So just to introduce myself, my name is Julie Crane, and I am the founder and executive director of Harriett's House, which is an anti-human trafficking organization focused on bringing freedom and healing to women survivors of human trafficking. I found out about this issue back in 2008. And when I first heard about it, the term human trafficking wasn't as widely used as it is today. It was more talking about women who are in prostitution, and actually how I learned about it was an organization that was in India who was going into brothels in India, and they were helping the women to get free. And so they had a place where the women could go and they could live in a safe area. They could learn a new skill so they wouldn't have to go back to the other way of life. And they would help them to get their education and just to have a better start at the next part of their lives. So when I heard about this, I thought, wow, I would really like to help women like this. But of course, back then, I didn't know how. So I thought the next best thing that I could do was to get involved with missions, because this was an international problem, so I thought. So I traveled to different countries to do missions work, and two of the trips that I took were specifically to work in aftercare programs with survivors of human trafficking. And so during that time, I learned, some of the ways that they serve the women and help them. And when I was along the years, I just kept educating myself about the issue, finding out more about it, realizing it is a domestic problem, that I didn't have to travel to India or to Cambodia to help women, that we could do that right here. And so in 2017, we started Harriet's House, which is named after Harriet Tubman. She helped women, and men get free from slavery back in those days. And human trafficking has also been called modern day slavery. So we help women that are in human trafficking situations or have been exploited in some way. So that's my opening about Harriet's House. Our vision is to combat human trafficking in all forms, because according to the Polaris Project, there are over 25 different forms of human trafficking. And we're not going to get into all of those forms today. We're only going to talk about two specifically. One's labor and the other one is sex trafficking. And our goal is to bring freedom and healing to women who've been sexually exploited. We do this by raising awareness, educating communities, that's why we're all here, and providing restorative care. So the definition of human trafficking is the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of commercial sex, act, or labor. Anyone under the age of 18 that's participating in commercial sex is automatically human trafficking and does not require force, fraud, or coercion. So there is no such thing as a child prostitute, because it is human trafficking. If somebody's being taken advantage in that way, it's automatically human trafficking. Commercial sex act includes escort services, prostitution, pornography, any sexual performance done in exchange for anything of value. So it doesn't just have to be money. It could be food, it could be clothing, it could be a place to live, it could be a meal, it could be anything. So it could be drugs. And human trafficking is the second largest criminal industry in the United States, only second to drug trafficking. And really, human trafficking and drug trafficking are linked. So it's still going to be on the rise. It's a $32 billion industry. It is a business for some people, and that is why it's raising so much money. Estimates show that there's over 27 million people worldwide victimized by human trafficking. So it's not just in those two categories, but in the other categories I talked about too. Supply and demand for cheap goods and commercial sex put people around the world at risk of becoming the supply. So labor trafficking in Maryland, according to the Polaris Project, domestic work, construction, illicit activities, agriculture, transportation, those are the top industries for human trafficking in Maryland, for labor trafficking. So some of the indicators that you can look for labor trafficking are those that are unpaid or paid very little for their work or have unusually long work hours. They may be housed with others that have similar jobs. The housing is inadequate or have too many people living in one house. So there was a situation that happened in Dorchester County a couple years ago where there were workers that were here on visas. They were all living in the same place. The housing was inadequate. There weren't enough places for people to sleep. The plumbing didn't work properly. There were leaks in the roof, so it wasn't adequate. So it was looked into during that time to see if it could be human trafficking. People that live and work at the same location, or they could be forced to work off a debt. So when somebody's coming from another country, sometimes they have to pay high amounts of money just to get here. And so automatically they're in debt bondage. And so they're told that they have to work off that debt in order to stay here. Or they're being escorted to and from the work site. They may not have identifying information, or someone else is holding it for them. So what are the vulnerabilities? Vulnerability has no age, gender, race, sexual orientation, or geographical location. Anyone can be vulnerable to human trafficking. We're going to watch a couple of videos today that will tell some stories about women that have been trafficked. And you'll see their stories are different. So anybody this could happen to anyone. But
Is that happening to children as well?
yes,
What's the source of that? Is it coming from coming from a system where kids are put into I forget the term now, where they're put into foster care and
it does happen. Yes. So foster care youth, number one. So with foster care, kids are used to somebody receiving money for them. So it wouldn't be a far stretch for them to have somebody else receive money for them for doing an act.
So I have a related question, and that is with the link with drugs. Are individuals sort of kidnapped or become attached to somebody who gets them on drugs so that then they can
Yes.
put them
You
in
see
sex?
that in movies, right?
Yeah, it does happen. So runaway or homeless youth. It's said that within the first 24 to 48 hours, if the trafficker sees a vulnerable youth, they could pick them up and use that as their leverage. Foreign nationals, those that have disabilities, individuals with a history of trauma or loss, individuals with substance abuse issues, because it can be something that could be taken advantage of, or they're doing that to keep control of that person. Plus, drugs are a coping skill. So if somebody is having to do something that they don't want to do over and over and over and over again, then that could be a way for them to cope with the things that they're dealing with. Unstable housing, the LGBTQ community, unstable housing or poverty, mental health concerns, people that have been coming here from another country recently relocated or migrated here. So barriers to identification. Victims may not disclose even if asked direct questions. So if you see somebody and you think that they might be in harm, they might not tell you that they are because they're afraid. They're afraid of the consequences of that person who's in control of them. So they could see that they have feelings of fear, shame, hopelessness. They might be loyal to their trafficker. So just like Stockholm Syndrome, they make a trauma bond with that person who is hurting them.
Do traffickers typically go through that process like that? And, sort of like, creating a Stockholm Syndrome so that they do stay with them?
Yes. So it is, and we'll get to that. Okay. they have loyalty, they may be under surveillance or might not be able to move freely. They may not have access to money or their own identification. They could be forced or supported drug addiction, just like we talked about. They could have forced involvement in illegal activities. Maybe they're not only just being trafficked for sex, but they could also be drug trafficked. Maybe somebody's hiding drugs in their body. And the abuse becomes normalized. So just like domestic violence, you go through cycles where that person will at first create a relationship with that person, they love them, it's a romantic relationship, and then they turn the tables on them and say, hey, can you go out and earn a couple of dollars so that we can pay the rent? And maybe start with going to a strip club and then eventually becoming that they're prostituting themselves.
Julie, isn't
Yes.
that why they like kids? Because they can groom them and it becomes normal. The kids don't fight the system so much because that's the way their life has always been.
Well, trafficking normally happens in a relationship. It's not generally the kidnapping that's happening, although it does happen that way. But the traffickers build relationship, whether it's a child or an adult, but they are taking time to build that relationship with the person to gain their trust, to fill a need. So if you saw in the other slide where it was saying that, maybe they have unstable living conditions. So a kid who just needs a stable home, who needs food every day or needs support from somebody, you're willing to create that atmosphere for them to be able then to turn the tables for them and use it against them. So they could blame themselves and not realize that they're a victim. A lot of the women that we've worked with didn't even know that they were a victim. They thought that it was their own fault. I did this to myself. I caused this. This was my choice. I should have never got involved with him. I should have never went to that party. So they blame themselves. Could resemble domestic violence because it has a lot of the same, it looks like a relationship. Then they're using the abuse to control the person. And so sometimes it could look the same as that. They lack awareness of resources and legal protections that are available for them. Or there could be a language barrier if it's somebody coming from another country. So the types that we want to hit on are the strip clubs. So that's generally a gateway for traffickers because they can use that as like the first attempt for somebody. So it's less troublesome for somebody to think about, oh, why don't you just go and dance in the club and make a couple dollars versus, go have sex for money. So that would be the first step, escort services. Anybody can get an escort at any time on our phones. There's lots of apps that are on there. There's sites that you can go to. So you can dial a date at any time. Pick who you want. Pictures will come up. A lot of times traffickers will set up those sites for the girls. So they're the one that's taking the picture. They're the ones that are putting information on there. They're the ones that are screening the dates. They're the ones that are setting them up. So it's at your fingertips. You could do this. Street prostitution. Don't see it as much, especially here on the Eastern Shore. Somebody once said to me that in Baltimore, labor trafficking is hidden, but sex trafficking is in your face. But on the Eastern Shore, labor trafficking is in your face and sex trafficking is hidden. So think about the dynamics of being rural and then inner city. So that's the difference. So it might be happening, you just can't see it. Illicit massage parlors. Does anybody know what that is? No.
Special kind of massage.
So illicit massage parlor, I'm going to tell you the indicators for this. Now this is pre-COVID. Now everybody has cameras at their doors and you might have to buzz to get in. But before COVID, the one indicator was that there was a camera at the door, you had to buzz to get in, and everybody coming and going was going through to be screened. Mostly men are going to these illicit massage parlors. It could be set up like an Asian spa. The windows are darkened, and then there's mostly the men that are coming and going. We actually had one in Dorchester County, right on Route 50. Next to, there's like a Cambridge Mart, a Salewinds, I think a Salewinds gas station. on the corner of Maryland Avenue. And right near that, there was a building, it was back in 2019, and it was Socorro Spa. And so, and a citizen actually noticed that there was some activity that was going on there that didn't look right. So he reported it to the police. They did a sting operation and found that it was indeed an illicit massage business. And they shut it down. So it wasn't long before that it ran. So it can happen anywhere. If it can happen, and it does happen a lot, especially,
Oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
But there was that famous case where the coach from, one of the big football teams got caught in Florida.
Uh-huh, that's right.
And, you know, he was a very wealthy man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He was in one of those massage.
Yeah.
So it's happening. We just have to know how to spot these things. And so that's why we're having this training. So if you can see some of the indicators and you can report what's going on, even with brothels. A brothel can happen anywhere. It doesn't have to be, in a hotel. It could be in a community. It could be in a neighborhood. Like if you see a lot of people coming and going in a neighborhood and you're thinking, what's going on there? You might think, oh, I wonder if they're selling drugs. They might be selling more than drugs. So it's something that I'm going to give you information on how to report so that you can have that information. If you see anything suspicious, that you can report it. So brothels, like I said, they're just it can happen anywhere. Usually in that location, it looks like a home, but there's not a lot of personal effects. So not pictures on the wall. There might be some furniture in the bedroom. There's just going to be a bed and a bedside table with some things to use. And then there could be blackened windows, and then in the drawers, if there's dressers and closets, there's not going to be any personal items in there. So it's just set up to look like it's more than that, not just a brothel. Pornography is also a gateway. A lot of times people get lured in thinking that it's an acting job, a modeling job, and then they're told that it's something else. And then once you get in, it's really hard to get out because there's threats, there's violence, there's so many things that are associated with it that makes that person feel like, I'm stuck. How can I get out of this? And then familial trafficking. So as you were talking about the foster care system, familial trafficking is where it's a family member that's selling another family member. And so you think about the power and control wheel. That power and control is already established if there's a parent that's trafficking their child, or even an older sibling, because they already know that authority figure. So something doesn't have to be set up for them. And they know, if your mom would give you a certain look, you knew you better get it together, right? So that kid knows, like if mom's looking at me or dad and they're requiring me to do something and I don't do it, there's going to be a consequence for that. So it's really hard for children to not obey the person that's an authority over them. And it's really sad, but that is something that happens a lot.
How does, in some cultures, when you have a lot of children, look back in our history, if you had a lot of children, they either worked on a farm and helped with the crops, or they were sent off to a relative's place to work, or went off to somebody else's home. We have cultures coming to our country now where this would be
Normal in their
Normal.
culture. Yeah.
to tell, to expect the kids to go out and have a job and bring the money home. How do you know the difference?
So I think that in our culture, we have to follow the rules of our government, right?
You can't work if you're underage,
Right.
right?
So that would
We
be,
have to stand up for the rules of this nation.
yes.
So Julie, you mentioned that it could be men and women,
Mhm.
predominantly women, but what is the percentage? I mean, is there any ratio,
It's
idea
hard
of
to get a
ratio?
percentage, because it's underreported.
Right.
So especially with men,
I think it's more
underreported.
younger men, probably,
It's hard to tell. It could be any age.
Yeah.
I mean, it's underreported because men don't want to report that they have been trafficked.
Well, and they're probably working, they're trafficked to be workers, not.
Well, both. It's going to be
Yeah,
both.
there is, I guess there are some men that would, pay for men
Sure, there's women who.
And women too.
Yeah.
Women with it,
Yeah,
yes.
So interesting, yeah.
yeah, but I was thinking, yeah, so I think of men being trafficked more to, that they have to go work,
Yeah,
being laborers or something,
And it's both.
yeah.
But it's hard to get statistics on the actual numbers. We could say it's a greater number of women and girls, but men and boys also are trafficked. The average age of the victim is 16, unless it's familial trafficking is involved, because as we talked about with children obeying their parents, they could be taken advantage of at an earlier age in familial trafficking. Social media has become a tool traffickers use to connect to potential victims. It is really important that we teach our youth how to be safe on social media. How many kids will open up a social media account, even if they're not old enough, because there are requirements, but they could lie about their age. And then they're setting this account up, they're putting everything online because they want everybody to notice them. And what if something is going wrong in the family? My mom, she's so strict, she won't let me do anything. They're putting it on social media. But how easy is it for someone to get on there and to start following that kid? To start chatting with them in the chat feature.
And kids will put pictures.
They will.
Like, they will put pictures out there that you wouldn't believe. They're like children that you would think wouldn't do. I mean, it's a constant problem.
Yeah. So we have to make our kids aware. Kids, grandkids, nieces, nephews, whoever, neighbor kids, that social media is, it is a playground.
Well, and even
People
if
that
it's
are
somebody that is a quote unquote friend on Facebook or TikTok or whatever, they're not really, have you ever met that person? You don't really know who you're talking to.
Right.
Well, and it's not just that. Girls will send a picture of themselves to their boyfriend, and then their boyfriend will share it on social media without the girl knowing, and it goes from there. So,
All of them.
Yeah. So we do have to teach. Because, we should never send anything on our phones, but people do it, and then it could be used against them. Like you said, live gaming is a method traffickers use to prey on victims. Think about a kid who's in their living room. They're playing games with somebody who's across the world. They got their headset on. You don't know what's going on. You only hear their conversation. And it's like, who are you playing games with? Oh, it's my friend. He lives in wherever. And your friend, how long have you known him? Well, we've been playing games together for a month. Well, how well do you know him? Well, he's really cool, Mom. He plays games with me. So they build up this trust through the connection, and then they feel like they can trust them, they feel like they know them, they feel like can connect with them. And so that's where the danger comes in.
what a world we live in.
And they probably misrepresent themselves on what their
Yes.
age is too.
Yes.
And probably, your kid probably thinks it's another kid.
Yep. And we're going to talk about that too. Trafficking normally happens within a relationship, and the trafficker spends a lot of time grooming their victim before they're trafficked. So what does grooming look like?
Oh, you look so cool in that dress, and, what a wonderful job you did of, talking about blah, blah, blah.
Positive
Give
reinforcement.
them what they need.
Exactly.
Yes, maybe gifts.
Affirmations. Right.
So what are they missing? What is that missing piece that they're looking for? Especially if they're on social media complaining about, they can fill that need and build a relationship. So here's some indicators. Now, these are not, just like labor trafficking, these are not just one thing you're looking for. It's going to be a group of things that could be an indicator. And I have some brochures back on the table that you can take with you that give you this information. So they might be deprived of food, water, sleep, or medical care. They could be isolated from their friends and family. There could be a presence of an older boyfriend or girlfriend who appears controlling. They could have signs of physical or sexual abuse. Mental health symptoms including fear, anxiety, depression, PTSD, or suicidal ideation. Injuries in various stages of healing, or the injury does not match the history. So they could have multiple bruises, like some look fresh, others look, that they've been days old. And then it's like, oh, how did you hurt yourself? And you feel like they have to make up a story. And it doesn't really fit with what the injury is. Signs of malnourishment, dehydration, or fatigue. They're unwilling to speak for themselves, or someone's answering on their behalf. Especially in a medical situation, if that person's insisting of going back with them, a lot of times they'll say no, because hospitals are trained. You know, you have to stay out here or in the doctor's office, things like that. So there are ways that healthcare providers can get them alone. Their responses seem rehearsed or scripted. Somebody's told them what to say, how to answer. They don't have access to their own money or identification. There could be signs of substance abuse disorder. They might be dressed inappropriately for the climate. Possess multiple motel keys, cell phones, or large sums of cash. Or they claim to be visiting the area, or they might be unaware of their location. I know in Cambridge, I say Cambridge, Dorchester, because that's where I live. We've had some people that were sent here from Baltimore. And it was kind of a normal thing. They were trying to get them out of the city, so they bring them to our city. And so we've met a couple of ladies that were trafficked, and that was the thing. They weren't, they didn't know where they were. They didn't been here that long. They didn't know the city. So we knew pretty quickly what situation they were in.
Are they getting them out of the city so that no one recognizes them? That's where they're from, and
I'm not really
it
sure
makes
why
it
they're doing that.
more difficult for them to be
Well, they
rescued.
They weren't targeted as far as they weren't saying that they were victims. So they were just relocated here from the city. Okay, so this is some different cases I'm going to talk about that happened on the Eastern Shore. So this one was from Cecil County, which is still considered the Eastern Shore, which to us it's like, oh, you're the Eastern Shore, you're far away. So on January 17, 2023, a Cecil County man is sentenced to more than 12 years in prison for sex trafficking a child. So this is the news article, and it says on January 17, 2023, the Judge Hollander sentenced Xavier Lee, aka X, 44 of Elkton, to 150 months in federal prison, followed by 25 years of supervised release for sex trafficking a minor. Judge Hollander also ordered Lee to pay restitution of $15,600 to a minor victim. As a result of his conviction, upon his release from prison, Lee will be required to register as a sex offender in the places where he resides, where he is employed, where he is a student, and under the sex offender registry. Okay, the sentence was announced by United States Attorney for the District of Maryland, Eric L. Barron. Okay, I'm not going to read all their names. According to his plea agreement, for the past decade, Lee operated an illicit prostitution business for financial gain, including operating a website where Lee posted advertisements of women whom he made available for commercial sexual acts with paying customers. That website was seized by the FBI in conjunction with the United States Attorney's Office and the Maryland State Police. For a time, Lee also operated a different website where he offered a subscription pornographic service to paying customers. So these are things that are happening on the internet. As detailed in the plea agreement, Lee admitted that he had sexual contact with a minor victim beginning when the victim was 14 years old. He's 44. Lee recorded his sexual contact with the minor victim when she was 15 and 16 years old. Investigators recovered 8 separate videos from Lee's electronic devices, each of which had been recorded by Lee and used, and each of which documented the sexual abuse of the minor. It depicted the minor victim engaged in sexual acts with Lee and with other adult men. Lee admitted that he was aware of the minor's true age. So for approximately 5 years, Lee's prostitution business was run almost exclusively out of a hotel located in Elkton. Not only did Lee primarily use the hotel in Elkton to prostitute women, Lee always used the same room. Lee ran his prostitution business according to a set pattern and protocol. Lee posted advertisements of women whom he made available for commercial sex acts with paying customers. The profiles of the women whom Lee was prostituting included photographs, descriptions, fictitious names. The website also listed the cost of the prostitution appointments, described services that were available, and allowed customers to post comments. Does that go along with what I just told you? But we can't see this, right? Unless we're physically looking for it. Unless I was looking for someone to fill that need.
He must have been paying the people who you rent the room from.
That's what I was wondering.
Right, what was going on there?
And did they get prosecuted too?
Well, it doesn't say.
But doesn't law enforcement, don't they like
They do
search
stings,
for
they,
things like this
yeah.
on the web and
they do, there's a
do
whole
sting
unit.
operations?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that done even in my local police departments?
I'm not sure here on the eastern shore, but I know that there's a lot that goes on the western shore. I've been in trainings where they talk about Latino brothels that are popping up and what they look like, and here's what to look for, and, you know, those are becoming more and more. And then, how they go on these sites to look for underage girls. Then they will, yes, they'll pose as a John who wants to have, you know, a date with that girl. They'll set up the date, they'll go in. They're not going in to do anything against the girl. They're going in to help her to get out of that situation. The problem is, where are the Johns being held accountable for this? Now, the traffickers, they will prosecute them, but it takes a long time for that to happen. Because as you heard, this was happening back in 2019, and he was just prosecuted in 2023.
5 years and the girl gets $15,000.
Right.
$3,000 a year.
Yeah.
And restitution isn't always,
And money
They
can't
won't
seem to
do
do
anything.
it.
But
No.
he probably doesn't have that much, I would guess.
Right, how's he gonna pay that?
Well, what do you do with all the money?
He might be 32.
I even go past a couple of hotels here, and I'll check, you know, the place is empty, and I'll always look to see where the cars are, and there's usually no cars, but there's 1 or 2 cars.
You're a private investigator.
Well, I'm aware that they use it.
That's good.
And yeah, I'll always check.
That's
You
good.
know, I don't-
We have to, right? Be aware. All right, so this one's from May 2022. Easton resident pleads guilty to federal charges for posing as a teenage boy on social media to entice minor females to send him sexually explicit images and videos of themselves. Okay? So this one, Mr. Aurora, 34, Mexican citizen residing in Easton, pleaded guilty to coercion and enticement of a minor to engage in illegal sexual activity. He admitted that he pretended to be a teenage boy on social media accounts in order to induce minor females to produce and send to him sexually explicit images and videos of themselves. According to his plea deal, from December 24th, 2017 through September 11th, 2018, he used the alias Elias Garcia to create a social media account. He used a social media account to persuade, induce, and coerce 4 minor victims to produce and send him sexually explicit images and videos of themselves. He initiated contact with each of the minor victims on social media and told the victims that he was a 16-year-old boy. Had his account set up. He used a profile picture depicting a teenage boy to manipulate the minors he met online. He complimented the minors, sent them images of flowers and money, made other romantic overtures to the victims. From these communications, he knew that the victims were underage minors. Despite that knowledge, he persuaded the victims to send him nude images and often sending them cash in the mail if they sent the sexually explicit images and videos that he requested. This guy was right here.
Where does social media play a role in this? Does the government, the government will shut down a social media account that
So
says.
here's where it goes on to say that they did.
Yeah.
They shut it down. So the social media platform became aware, and in May of 2018, they terminated his Elias Garcia account. The social media platform also alerted the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and submitted a cyber tip detailing a sexually explicit online conversation that he had with one of the victims, a 15-year-old female. So in this case, there were 6 victims that he had been taking advantage of.
And it's pretty easy too. I worked in a middle school for a while, and the girls would show me their pictures.
Yeah.
And I'd say, wow, it's kind of sexy. And I remember one girl saying, oh, my mother saw it.
Mhm.
So it's like that's enough permission, and out it goes.
Okay, now this one I don't have an article, what do I? Let's see. So in February 2022, the sex trafficking leader pleads guilty to kidnapping in relation to sex trafficking scheme, and the Federalsburg police were involved. So no, I don't have the article in this one, but all of these articles can be found online at the
Sorry.
Eastern Shore Human Trafficking Task Force.
Do you
They
want me-
have a lot of different, and I have a link at the end.
Okay, I was
Yeah.
gonna say, do you want me to pull it up?
So it's, they have lots of other articles, but I only pulled some that were specific to our area. Oh my gosh. And then this one is from 2019, 3 indicted in 2018 sex trafficking case. 2 Caroline County residents and a Carroll County man allegedly forced a woman to engage in commercial sex acts in October of 2018. So this one, according to the attorney, Kevon Murphy, 27 of Federalsburg, Akina Aldridge of Federalsburg, and Joshua Langford of Manchester, Maryland, have been charged with conspiracy to commit sex trafficking by force, fraud, and coercion, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and kidnapping. The indictment came on Thursday, August 1st, and all 3 defendants have had an initial appearance. The indictment alleges that Aldridge, Langford, and Murphy rented hotel rooms for a woman to engage in commercial sex acts, as well as transporting the woman to outcalls to hotels and other locations to engage in commercial sex acts, including transporting her across state lines. So a lot of times that was what will happen too, is that not only crosses state lines, it can also cross county lines. So jurisdiction to jurisdiction.
That becomes very messy.
It does,
Well,
yes.
that's when they cross state lines, the FBI is automatically involved.
Yeah, but county lines are a big problem too.
There are, yeah. Aldridge allegedly provided narcotics, including heroin, to the woman to recruit, entice, and maintain the woman throughout the course of her engaging in commercial sex acts. The indictment alleges Aldridge, Langford, and Murphy caused the woman to communicate with the solicit potential sex customers via the internet, including social media on their cellular phones. On October 29, 2018, after the woman performed commercial sex acts in Maryland at the direction of the defendants, they used force and physically assaulted the woman in order to transfer her against her will from Federalsburg to a motel in Laurel, Delaware, to continue the sex trafficking conspiracy. So again, you see how drugs were used, how force was used, and they even kidnapped her. So kidnapping can be a part of it. The woman called 911 to say that she was being held hostage and had been assaulted. When the state troopers arrived, Murphy answered the door. According to the affidavit, a woman walked behind him. His left shoulder stood up on her toes, made eye contact with the troopers, and appeared to be mouthing words with no sound. Believing the woman to be the 911 caller, troopers made contact with everyone inside the room, which included Aldridge and another man. The woman was wearing only a white bed sheet when she left the room and was placed into a patrol vehicle and had visible bruising to her neck and jaw. So this is just another example, and it was here on the Eastern Shore. Now this next one, I don't have the article for this one, but it's the Denton couple pled guilty to human trafficking for injecting a 15-year-old girl with heroin and forcing her to perform prostitution on adult men. So this is how drugs can play into that as well. And so 15. You know, when we think about the brain, the brain is not finished developing until 27, 25, 27. And so a child who's 15 years old, and there are, you know, who knows how she got involved with this, but somebody lured her in, right? And then they're shooting her up with heroin. So a lot of times traffickers will cause that person to become addicted to drugs so that they will do what they need. Because if you're high on heroin and you start to crash, you're gonna need that next fix. And if you don't get it, you're gonna get really sick. So you're willing to do whatever you have to do to get that next fix. So when we think about people that have addictions issues, we need to change the way that we look at them because it is an addiction. It is a really heavy issue for that person. And doing whatever you need to get that next high is more important to them than being dope sick. So we need to take the judgment off of addictions because it is a really complicated issue that people deal with. And just, you know, help them to get help. So this is 2017, a human trafficking victim was going to sue the Salisbury Hotel for failure to take action against a human trafficking ring being operated at America's Best Hotel in 2014. So this was a huge ring that was busted because they don't, not only were they using America's Best, they were using other hotels in the area for this trafficking ring. And so the victim thought that the hotel should be responsible because we felt like they knew what was going on. Why didn't you protect us? Why didn't you report this? And so, like somebody said earlier, were they getting a kickback because of that? Who knows?
So were they found to be guilty, the hotels?
I didn't
or-
follow it all the way through,
Yeah.
so it's on the Eastern Shore Human Trafficking Task Force website. And then this one, this is the last one. This is the one that brought human trafficking to our attention here on the Eastern Shore. This one was right here in Easton. So in 2011, the article was written, but Easton brothel worker pleads guilty to transporting prostitutes and is sentenced to a year in prison. So I think since then, they've really increased the laws and the punishment for human trafficking. So we think a year, how did they get away with that for, doing this? But this was the one that actually was brought to the attention of the community, and then the community said, we need to do something about this. So the Eastern Shore Human Trafficking Task Force was created after this, and Brad Hill led the charge on that for many years. Now we have somebody who's a different person that is at the lead of the Human Trafficking Task Force on the Eastern Shore. His name is Ed Thomas. And so he is one that still does a lot of work here. But in this article, it says, U.S. District Judge Benson Everett Legg sentenced Jimenez Sanchez, age 32 of Easton, Maryland, to a year and a day in prison, followed by a year of supervised release after Jimenez Sanchez pleaded guilty to the transporting or aiding and abetting in the transport of individuals to engage in prostitution. Upon completion of his sentence, Jimenez Sanchez, a Mexican citizen who entered the United States illegally, is expected to be deported back to the U.S. from the U.S. to Mexico. The guilty plea was announced by United States Attorney for District of Maryland, Rod Rosenstein. According to the statement of facts, Jimenez Sanchez's plea agreement in July 2010, he began working in a brothel in Easton, Maryland. On May 20th, 2010, a codependent of Jimenez Sanchez, who was alleged to run the brothel, handed a prostitution business card to a confidential source. The codependent told the source about the girls at the Easton brothel. The source said the same man tried to hand him another business card several days later. On July 6, 2010, a source telephoned the number on the business card, which was a cell phone being used as a brothel located at 318 East Dover Street in Easton. A man answered the phone and when asked, informed the source that there was a 17-year-old Honduran girl available who was new and very good. On July 7, 2010, the Easton Police Department, Annapolis Police Department, and U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement executed a search warrant at the brothel and arrested Jimenez Sanchez, a co-defendant and a female engaged in prostitution who were in the apartment. A search of the home recovered condoms, lubricants, and other items reflecting that the apartment and individuals were involved in prostitution. Women who worked as prostitutes in the brothel stated that the man who ran the brothel misled them into believing that the work they would perform in Maryland was domestic housework, and subsequently, he kept them working as prostitutes by threatening them and their families with physical injury and violence. So that's a tool that traffickers will use. So if they're not afraid of their own abuse and violence, they'll say, I know you have a 10-year-old sister at home. I'll go get her next. Who wouldn't be afraid of that? You know, you're going to do what you're asked to do. So with women and men and children that are trafficked, there's layers of complex trauma that's happening to them. We all have experienced trauma in some way. And a lot of times it might be one event that happened. But this is complex trauma in the way that it's happening over and over and over and over again. And it's building on top of each other. So it really makes it hard for that person to break free, but then after that, to heal and to start a new life. So what instances of trafficking have you seen? And this is just, it's not one that you have to answer, but just some questions. Have you seen people that don't have identification and documentation? People that are being controlled by someone? How about people that have been arrested for multiple crimes or are repeat offenders? So some of the women that we've seen, they've been arrested for theft or drugs, or it could be prostitution. But if they're getting arrested for all these things, there might be something deeper to the story. So it might not just be that they're a bad person. It might be that something's happening to them. Because we've heard stories of women who have been, having to do this as their job, and they're getting arrested just so they don't have to go to work that night. They're getting arrested because that's just not going to happen in jail. They're going to get some reprieve. And then people involved in domestic violence or in partner violence relationships, because I said before, these look the same.
You know, the thing that's really frustrating with that too is that the perpetrator usually, to anyone else talking to that person, they will seem glib and happy and calm and normal, friendly, and you would never know. And I've seen that in domestic violence cases where, the woman has been, has been violently treated, but the husband acts like a perfectly normal, friendly guy.
Right.
So I can imagine that being the case for trafficking as well.
So that's not how place. Can you go to the next one?
Do you have a flash drive? Because I can get these loaded while you're.
I do.
Finally, most of these cases, you've indicated that they're not Americans, like they're Mexicans, and that they're women are from a different culture too. Is that really the case?
No, it's not. So these are just ones that have gone all the way through the system or have been started in the system. So there's a lot of cases that don't make it all the way through the system. So people get away with it.
And to your point, who are the people making the demand?
And I think they probably look a lot like everybody sitting in this room,
Well,
and their sons or daughters.
Well, I know over in Delaware, there have been reported cases of Russians, women who are.
In Ocean City.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we need to take a closer look at a lot of things. Yes.
Exactly.
So why do
why
we
do
turn a blind eye?
Yeah.
Because this is a horrible topic.
Right.
And it's sad that we have to talk about it. But it is happening, and I think it's easier to look the other way than to deal with it. Because most people feel powerless, and they don't know what to do to help.
It's like when you said, have you seen this? I've never seen any of that.
Right.
I mean, people without documentation and things like that. I mean, I wouldn't know
Well, a lot.
where I would be, where I would see that.
Right.
You know, it doesn't really happen in my neighborhood or my
Right.
church or places that I go.
Well, it might be in your neighborhood if you
It
have,
might.
if you have the low blow kind of crew that comes in, they can't find workers right now, so, gotta find them someplace.
I think this kind of information, and it's probably going to be very controversial, is important to have in the schools for the adolescent.
It is.
Girls and boys, because I know personally of an individual who, she and her twin brother were sexually abused by her father, and as was her older sister. And I don't imagine that they ever talked about it to anybody. She was a caregiver for my husband, and she confided in me, but I think, that these kids, they don't, and I know she got married early because she probably couldn't wait to get out of the house. But how do these kids, I mean, they're putting things online, but when do they start to feel uncomfortable? Or do they have a friend that knows they're doing this and, could help? Because I don't think they would confide in the teachers necessarily, but
But
who
it's an adult they can
shouldn't-
trust if you
Yeah.
can trust your
shouldn't they
parents.
know about this? And
They should be educated.
and
I
should
want to start off with a warning that this video does contain adult topics. Today, I would like to introduce you to Ori, an incredible woman who is a survivor of sex trafficking. And this is a topic that I am incredibly passionate about, and I think there's so much misinformation out there. So hopefully we can all learn something today, but also Ori's story is a story of hope. Regardless of what you've been through, there is hope.
My name is Ori. I am bold, brave, blunt, willing to fight, and that comes from a lot of the things that I've been through in my life. I was born at Chowchilla State Prison. My mother was fighting murder at the time when she had me. At 2 days, I was adopted by a single mother who worked 3 jobs in order to provide for me. I had a very normal childhood in the very beginning up until the age of 8 when I was molested by a family friend. By the time I was about 9 and a half, 10 years old, I experienced a rape, and there was no justice that was ever served. I didn't receive any counseling. My mother never had a conversation with me about it. I think it was very hard for her. So it was all these feelings of like insecurity and feeling like I don't belong, guilt and shame and dirtiness was bottling up inside. I ended up running away and met a friend. We went to this house, which was like a drug house. She left me and said, I'll be right back. In that house was a male sitting on the couch right next to me. For the first time in my life, somebody asked me, was I okay? After the rapes, after the molestation, after all the bullying, somebody finally asked me, was I okay? I told that man my life story in 30 seconds. And he didn't have to come and look for me. Like, he didn't have to come hunt like how normal traffickers do. I fell right on his doorstep. I was a kid in need. I needed shelter. I needed clothes. I needed food. And I was gonna need someone to take care of me because I was only 11 years old. And I just remember this look in his eye was just like this. I got her. And he started to groom me. And then that grooming process is he was preparing me to be trafficked. And I remember just freaking out in the back seat, like scared. He got out, was yelling, why are you crying? And he hit me. I want to just go home. I want to go home. And he was just like, where are you going to go? Nobody wants you. And I believed those lies. And he grabbed me by my hair and dragged me down the street. My knees were scraping the floor. It was other women out there. Nobody did anything. When you have been forced to sleep with 7 to 15 men and be raped and be 11 years old, I was like slowly dying. And after the first night, you suppress those feelings because any inch of hope that you have, any sense of I can get out, any feeling of there's a God, any feeling of I don't deserve this, you get beat. You ain't gonna survive out there. By the time I was 12 years old, within a year, I was already raped over 4,000 times. It took me to be 4.5 years in the life until I was 15 years old for someone to finally step up and do something. And that was a man. His name is Jim Carson. And he was the first person in my life to tell me that I was a victim. It was never a choice. It's not a choice for these kids. Whether it was an influence, someone influenced them, whether it was somebody physically forced them into it. They're children whose dreams and innocence was stolen and snatched from them. Children who need someone to fight for them because they can't fight for themselves. Showing up when they don't expect you to. And saying, I care about you, I'm here for you, and I'm not giving up on you. I was starting to see what hope looked like.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being so open. I think there are a lot of misconceptions about what sex trafficking looks like. For example, a lot of people picture, the van with the dark windows and women that are chained up. But in your case, it was manipulation. At 11 years old, I remember wanting to be liked and wanting to feel like I belong. Like, that's all that man needed to show you.
A lot of times, too, a misconception is people automatically think it's somewhere else. Like, it doesn't happen here.
Yes.
It doesn't happen right here in our backyard. A lot of times, that's why we call it the invisible crime, especially nowadays because of social media.
Yes.
Like, traffickers are using social media in order to recruit young girls.
Okay, this is so important. I think a lot of parents tend to be naive when it comes to social media.
As parents, we think, not my kid.
Yes.
My kid is smart enough to not talk to a stranger. And all it takes is a click of a button, and now I'm following you. And now I'm on your page, and I'm seeing that you're a minor, and boop, now I'm in your inbox. And now we're having a dialogue and a conversation.
But also, people think it's a certain type of person. It's the dirty old man who is going to buy sex with a child. But from your experience, it's the guy you would never assume, right?
It's not. It's men who are married, men who, different professionals in the field. I've had conversations with these men after things had happened in that hotel room or in that apartment, and talking about their children, talking about their wives. Like, this is a reality and what's going on. Like, it's not what we think.
So they're having sex with a child and then just kind of matter of fact telling you about their own children?
And going home right to their own family. It's crazy.
You are such an incredible example of the fact that our past doesn't have to define us. If you hadn't told me your story, I wouldn't know. You're full of life, you're vibrant, you're funny, you're gorgeous. And the fact that you've gone through this hell and you are now using it, you're working with Saving Innocence, which is an organization that is working to end sex trafficking.
Yeah. Everything I went through in life was in order to be able to help someone else. I got hired on at Saving Innocence about 1.5 years ago. So I go into the juvenile halls, the same juvenile halls I used to be at, and I get to work with the kids on prevention work. I get to be that person that I didn't have when I was a kid.
The fact that you're using all that pain that you've been through to now help others is so inspiring to me.
You can overcome anything. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be a victim of sex trafficking. It can be divorce. It can be your kids are driving you crazy, or your kids are just trying to figure themselves out, and to know that it doesn't last forever.
Yeah.
And that I can always send the elevator back down for someone and lift someone up instead of tearing someone down for what they've been through. Everyone has a story. We all have been through something that has affected us and has made an impact in our lives that can help someone else out.
But instead of letting that stuff define you, you are using it to help people who are walking through the hell you walk through.
Because it's just only one small part. It doesn't define me. It doesn't define us.
Do you know your worth now?
Yeah, most definitely.
Love it.
Just, and every day is still such a beautiful learning moment, though. Just to be able to be a mother to my daughter and to give her this beautiful life that I didn't have, that's a good feeling.
What would you tell 11-year-old Ori?
I would tell her that you have a purpose. I want you here. I would tell her that she's strong. I would just hug her. I would just hug her so tightly and tell her I would never give up on her. I would just be there for her. Tell her, how much she has to offer to the world. And that she's not broken. And that she's going to change people's lives.
Thank you so much for using your story to help others. There's nothing more powerful.
I think when I was first you know, on the streets, I still kind of separated myself from everybody else that was down there and looked at myself as like unique, that like, you know, I'm not as bad off of as these people. I'm not as dirty as these people. I haven't, you know, done certain things yet. I haven't been arrested yet. Like, I'll be fine.
Kensington Avenue runs under an elevated train, they call it the L. So it's kind of like a hallway almost, where it's the stores and then there's the train platform. So there's no sunlight, there's nothing like that. It's inner city. There's trash, there's everything you could think of. It's abandoned buildings, abandoned factories, abandoned houses. And then there's the heroin, and there's on every street corner down there, there's dealers. You can't go anywhere without running into dealers.
It went from trying it, you know, probably to within a month, like needing to do it every single day. So when I moved down there, like it was very bad. It wasn't about like the thrill of getting high. It was like, I need this, or like I feel like I'm going to die because I'm getting that sick.
That's one of the tools that the pimps use to keep these girls under control and keep them in the working status, because they need the drugs, they need the money to get the drugs. So that's a big key factor in their control over these girls.
In the beginning, it's easy for them to manipulate you when you have nothing, and they're literally providing you with everything. And they have that control over you. It kind of became just like giving in to them, because I felt obligated, you know, to do certain things with them in order for them to keep providing for me. If they would be physically abusive towards you, you know, then they would remind you that they were like your primary source of income, your primary, you know, place to have a roof over your head to feed you. So even though that part of it was there, it's kind of like you were willing to sacrifice. I was willing to sacrifice enduring that, because without that person, like I thought I had nothing.
We ran into her and she didn't fit. She didn't belong. She was clean. That's a big thing. And she was dressed nice. And that didn't fit. And then after we talked to her, she was educated. It all didn't jive.
He probably first met me when I had just gotten out there, and I wasn't, you know, as bad off or as beaten up as I was, you know, years later, when he found me again.
Then the second time, it's like, all right, you're back down here, what's going on? And the progression started, where she just kept getting worse and worse and worse and deeper into Kensington, where she couldn't get out.
It's honestly like a war zone is how I would describe Kensington. I normalized it so much, but most of what goes on there is, you know, drugs, prostitution, and violence. It's crazy when I think about it now, because it's no way for a person to live. Finally,
at some point, her mom actually reached out to me and wanted me to, you know, see if I could find her. They wanted to get her help and get her off the street and out of what she was doing and where she was. I had alienated myself from them for so long, lied to them, stole from them, had them searching for me for months, putting out missing persons reports for me. There had been warrants out for my arrest because I had failed to appear in court for months, like I was running from the police. And Detective Johnson was on the warrant unit at that time. I remember I was walking down a one-way street this way, and I see a truck go this way. And for a split second, I thought about running. He got out of the car and he handcuffed me, and he literally called my mom on the phone to say, like, we found your daughter. So that day that he arrested me, it's kind of like I had that moment of clarity where I realized that I was going to be in trouble because I was going to be in jail. But I also had that sense of relief that was a little scary, because I knew that it was over. I knew that the way that I was living and, you know, my days on the streets and years of living that way was ending. So as scared as I was, it was almost relieving in a sense to know, like, even if this is forced, like, my life doesn't have to be like this anymore.
Looking back, like that day, he saved my life in the sense that had he not gotten me then, like I don't think that I would have made it off of the streets alive had I continued to stay out there.
I don't look at it like that, like I saved her life. I mean, now sitting back after she said it, yeah, but that's what I was supposed to do. That was my job. That's what the task force, everybody was here to do. That's what we're supposed to do, is help these girls get off the street.
Whether it's, addiction or prostitution or human trafficking, it doesn't discriminate against any, socioeconomic status or any background. Even me in the beginning thought I come from a good family, an educated family, a good area, this could never happen to me. I was one of those naive, ignorant people that didn't think it could happen to me, as though I was above other people. But it can happen to anybody. You don't have to come from, a bad home or live in the inner city where that stuff might be misconceived as being more prevalent. It happens everywhere. It can happen to anybody.
So we saw 2 different stories, but there's so many more that are out there. So what to do if you suspect human trafficking? You can call the tip line and report anonymously. And then we also have a human trafficking navigator that these positions were opened up last year. We have one that's in the lower shore and one that's in the mid shore. So if you had something to report to the mid shore, it's going to be for all seasons. So Susan Alstrom is the regional navigator with For All Seasons, and it's her responsibility to find resources for any human trafficking survivors that are up to 24 years old, youth up to 24.
And this is the document I'm sending out to everybody, yes,
And
I'll
then
send it with the.
The lower shore, for the counties on the lower shore, Life Crisis Center houses the human trafficking there. And her name is Danielle Thomas, and she will do the same job as Susan does in Midshore by getting resources for a youth up to 24 years old. And I know they serve women that are older or men that are older than 24 years old, but that's their, in their requirement is up to 24. So there's also, you can go online and get more information through the National Human Trafficking Hotline website, and then the Polaris Project. And there's resources, one at the end that she'll be sending out. So we had a drop-in center in Cambridge. We were open up since 2019, and the whole goal was to serve women in the community where they could come in and get resources. They didn't have to be trafficked or anything to come in, just any woman. So during that time, we started to see who we were helping. And so in that, we have served some women who have been trafficked, but the most part of women that we were serving were women that were exploited in some way. And they didn't even realize that they were being exploited. We have different cases that we worked with, and one was a mom of 5 who was not able to work because her youngest child had disabilities. And so sometimes her husband would ask her to prostitute so that she could help pay the bills. And she felt obligated to do that because she wasn't able to go out and get a job. But she didn't think that there was anything wrong with that that was what was expected of her. And so during that time, we've had over 300 touch points with our clients, even through COVID. We were able to go into the community and bring food boxes to people that needed it and still touch base with them while we weren't able to be open for serving women. It's not true. Forgot.
It's all right.
So we realized that there is a need for housing. And like I told you from the beginning, I felt like that was what I wanted to help with. And so that idea of investing in the women for a long-term period and enabling to have a new life. So before we had our resource, there was no resources here on the Eastern Shore for housing or a program for women. Human trafficking survivors need specialized care due to that complex trauma that I talked about. And then housing options are limited across the United States. There aren't many options for men, women, children, women with children. So there's lots of needs that are out there. So we opened up Mary's Sanctuary. It's called Mary's Sanctuary because the house was donated to us. And the guy that donated it, we decided to name it after his mom. She had passed away in 2019 and encouraged him to do something good with his life. And he felt this would be a good cause for him to be able to get involved with. It is located in an undisclosed location in Dorchester County. We serve adult women 18 and up. We have the capacity to serve 4 residents. We have 24-hour staff, 7 days a week, and it's up to 18 months in the length of stay. So in the home, the highest priority is safety. And so because of that, we do have a home that's equipped with exterior cameras, a security system, privacy fence, and then the address is disclosed, and the local police department knows who we are too. So we do have those open lines of communication. And we've never had an issue with safety since we've been open. We have been open for residential care since October 22, and in that time, we have served 8 women. And with this, we have 4 phases of care. So in the first phase, we're going to focus on stabilization, safety, and sobriety. So we teach life skills and then also help with therapy right away. In the second phase, we focus on academics and continued therapy, life and relationship skills, because we need to learn how to get along with each other. That's not something that comes naturally if you weren't taught. So in that second phase, we're helping them to look at the college courses that are available. Do you have your GED? Do you want your GED? Do you want to go back to school and continue your education if you already have it? So helping them to set goals, long and short, so that we can get them going in a new direction. So then the third phase, we're focused on job training, resume writing, mock interviews, help them to attain a job, and then they continue with their academics and their life skills. And then the last phase, we're focusing on saving money, helping them open a bank account. We don't charge them to be in our care. So from the time they get there to the time that they leave, they're not responsible to pay for rent or electric and things like that. If they have food benefits, then they can certainly purchase their food with that. But other than that, we don't have a requirement for them to be there financially. So then when they start working, they can save their money. And then when they get out, we're going to help them to, set that up so they can get an affordable place to live too. So it is a process. Criteria for care, they must be 18 years old, a female, victim of trafficking or exploitation, and sober from drugs and alcohol, or willing to go to rehab, because we are not a medical facility, so we can't detox somebody. So it would be best that they do that before they come to our care. They must be ambulatory because we have steps in the home, not a threat to self or others, and committed to healing and change. And that is the biggest thing, is if they're not committed to be there, it's not going to work. Beyond the scope of our care, we do not have the capacity to serve women and children. If they have court obligations requiring out-of-state travel, like if they're on probation from another state, we can help with that. We just have to stay under those requirements. But if they need to go to court somewhere else, that will be out of our ability. And then somebody who is not actively suicidal or homicidal or in a mental health crisis, because it's, a lot to deal with anyway. We do have a referral form on our website, and if you wanted to check out our website just to get more information, there's lots of information on there. So once that referral is filled out, we have a conversation with that agency. We do an assessment, we interview with the applicant, and then we decide if they're a good fit for us and we're a good fit for them. Yes.
So when you say agency, like who would refer?
So
Okay.
we've gotten referrals from FBI. We've had Homeland Security call us with referrals. We've gotten referrals from,
Oral seasons.
yes, we have. We've gotten them from rehabs, from detention centers. So they come from all sorts of places, but we,
to turn people away?
yes. Mhm. Or that they're not good, it's not a good fit. So we have gotten probably at this point close to 75 referrals in the last year and a half.
Do you have a list of other residences that you can refer
Yes.
them to?
Mhm. So some of the referrals also come from an organization called Rescue America, and they get referrals from all over the place. So we have gotten out-of-state referrals too. So Rescue America is like a hotline number that women and men can call to get help, and then they refer from there. So they have a whole resource center. So sometimes if we have people that we can't help, we'll refer them to other agencies that can help them to find the resource that they need. There's also a resource it's they're either in Maryland or close to DC, and they are the National Trafficking Sheltered Alliance, and they're connected to other resources across the United States as well. So there are a couple of different organizations that are just finding places for women to go. So they're connected to her.
It seems like it would be beneficial to have the victim not in the community.
Exactly.
Trafficked.
Yes.
They wouldn't be tempted to be contacted, et cetera.
And plus, a lot of times it's a safety issue.
Sure.
So they're feeling under duress. They feel like that person finds them. So going to a new location. So even if we had somebody in Maryland that needed, and maybe they were from this area, we would try to find them something outside the area so that they would be safe. So there's a lot of things to think about.
Is the house subsidized primarily by donations or
Yes.
grants?
Both. So we do have a government grant that's gonna run out at the end of, June. But we have a lot of, other funding that comes from individuals, from, foundations. We have to apply for local grants. So it is a continuing cycle that we have to continue to raise the money in order to continue to do what we do. Because we have the staff, we have to pay people to work. So that's our biggest expense. Because our house is paid for. When it was donated, we also raised all the money to renovate it, so we have no debt, which is a blessing, because it's not hanging over our head. And then we also had Purdue that donated $25,000 so that we could buy a van. So we were able to do a lot of the things without it costing us money out of our pockets, but generous donors who got involved to be able to be a part of this.
How many people do you have on your staff?
We have 9. So we have to have overnights, weekends, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That is covered. So we have 4 full-time staff and the rest are part-time.
And I assume they're all women?
Yes, we don't hire men because sometimes women, are triggered by that, and plus it's just to be safe. Yeah. So community involvement, you're all community members. So opportunities for volunteerism, and Anne has been one of our volunteers. Job opportunities, because we're always hiring. It's a hard job.
What kind of volunteer needs do you have?
So we, volunteers, like you've done transportation before for our client who went to an outing. We also have the opportunity if somebody wants to teach a skill in the home. So if you like to cook, if you like to garden, if you like to do art projects, the women are always eager to learn a new skill. So you could come and teach something like that. You could lead a study, a book study. You could even transportation. So there's lots of different ways to work with the women that are in our program.
Do they have access, I'm just wondering if they have access to a video course like this, if they wanted to
Yeah, we could, yeah.
just learn something, about, the area or whatever.
Yeah, so I think about like those photography courses with you, things like that. That would be good.
Because I'm sure we could do that.
Well, our library is pretty full of all kinds of courses. I'm sure that everyone here could also be volunteered for interviewers, to give them training for job interviews and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be good.
Maybe you could even set up a day once a month where people come in and pose as, go through that process so they can learn about them.
So they'd have to be at that point in the program to do that. So, but that would be a great idea.
Do you have like an annual fundraising event?
We do. And it's going to be in October. Do you want to talk about that?
No, it's a very moving experience, because the one I attended last year, there was a woman who spoke about her experience and talk about the tissues that you need and the journey and the hurdles, the ups and downs. It's like any recovery, right?
Yes.
Many times they fall and they come back and they fall and then, they succeed. And the mind games that go on. The women that are brave enough to do the video and share in a group of people in a room, it says a lot about their inner strength. So,
And they're healing, right?
and they're what?
Healing.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So they had to come a far, far way in order for that to happen for them. But yes, ours this year is gonna be in October. We were gonna have it next month, but then it's hard with the holidays getting on gear with a fundraiser. So we are doing it in October, October 5th. It's gonna be a Roaring Twenties party. So bring the flapper dresses and.
Where is it going to be?
It's gonna be at East Newmarket Fire Hall. So we can put information out there.
East of Cambridge.
East Newmarket, yeah, so Cambridge, and then if you're, so are you guys not familiar with East Newmarket?
I don't know where it is.
There's Route 16 that turns off of 50, there's like a light there, and it's down that road.
That's what they never heard suicide breach. Restaurant.
Suicide, yes, there you go. Thank you for that context. Like, well, how do I tell suicide?
There's probably information on your website.
There, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so, there's not yet about the fundraiser in the fall, but we're always doing things. We actually just did a fundraiser on Friday, which is it was just a little fundraiser, but it was fun. We put the fun in fundraiser that time where we learned how to make sourdough bread from the starter. So the instructor had starters for everybody, and then we watched her do how to make the sourdough bread, so I made 2 this weekend. So, and then next month, we're having a cookie decorating class. My daughter-in-law does sugar cookies, and they're beautiful, and so she's going to do 4 different cookies to teach us how to do that. So we're doing little things like that too. So we can always put that information on our website. So you can do all of these things, follow us on social media, sign up for our emails. We put an email newsletter out every month just to update everybody about what's going on. But there's ways you can get involved. And then this is my contact information, which is also on a card back there. All of the information on these slides was derived from these different websites. And now's the time. If you have any questions.
I have one last question.
Yes.
Are there other, I mean, you said you conceived of this, but are there other programs like this that actually house women? And there are.
There are. So there are, in Maryland, there are a couple over in Baltimore. They're more short term. But then across the United States, there's over 200, almost 300 at this point. So how we've gotten involved with this, we got involved with an organization called the Sheltered, what are they called? Samaritan Women. So Samaritan Women used to do residential care, and now they teach others to do it. So they train other organizations to open up residential programs. So in 2019, we went into a program with them to learn how to do this. And so we're constantly being trained and in connection with other organizations that also do this work.
Does Easton have one? I mean, didn't we have one a few years ago?
There's a house for homeless people. Yeah, and it includes women and families and men.
But not with that specific.
It's on Goldsboro Street.
They have 2 now, right?
Oh, just, oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So online, does anybody online have any questions? We're about ready to wrap it up.
I haven't got anything in chat.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for coming.